What day? I hope you're having a great start to your week. Welcome to So What? Today we're going to be going through one of our free projects. It's a brand new pattern at sulky.com and it's great for springtime, summertime. It is our Quilting Bee Placemat set. So I'm going to be taking you through how this all comes together. And we're going to do a little bit of a paper piecing tutorial, foundation paper piecing, using Sulky Paper Solvy. So if you've never tried paper piecing before, this episode is for you. If you have tried it, but you've never tried Sulky Paper Solvy when doing paper piecing, I think you're going to like this one. All right, so be sure to be commenting, posting your comments in the live chat, and if you do so, you will be automatically eligible to win a pack of Sulky Paper Solvy, so you can try it out for your own self. So be sure to be commenting, sharing out this post, giving me those great emojis, engaging with me here this afternoon, and that's all you have to do to be eligible for today's great little gifty from Sulky. So before we get started, I have some business to attend to because we have heard from several folks who are trying to get in on our London tour this November. We are going to be exploring Christmas markets in London. We're going to be going to some Downton Abbey sites and castles and things like that. We are going to see some Harry Potter tours and things of this nature. And we're going to do lots of other things on this tour to England with craft tours. So I've heard from a number of you trying to get in on the tour and you're not having any luck sending in your email to craft tours. So I got a hold of them and they are just super busy right now. It's a happy problem for them, but they've just really got to filter through all of their email requests, all of their phone calls and voicemails. You can only imagine how busy they can get when they release a bunch of tours. So they are handling all of the customer service and all of those requests to get on our Sulky London tour. Sort of in order of which they were received. So just bear with them at this time. If you have any questions about the tour, how it works when you travel with craft tours, this will be my 4th tour with craft tours. So you can go ahead and email us at Sulky and I will answer any of those types of questions. We can even have a phone call if you have a lot of questions that you need answered. If you have craft tours specific questions or you're ready to book right now, you can contact them directly. And they do say that it's probably going to be quicker for you to actually give them a call rather than go on their website. So give them a call during business hours Central Time, and you should be able to get a hold of them much quicker. So I just wanted to give everybody an update because, time is ticking for this tour. Yes, it is in November, but they do close the tour, I think around July or August, just for, passport purposes and to get everybody's information out to them in time, all those good things. So you do need to hop on this tour rather quickly to reserve your spot. So I wanted to make sure that we took care of that business. And again, if you have any questions regarding how it works when you go on the tour, anything that we're going to see and do, any questions for me, we will be doing a hands-on sewing class as well during that tour. And we're going to be making something really cool to commemorate our travels together. So I think you'll all like that as well. So any of those types of questions that I can answer, shoot those my way. But any logistical things or payment questions, or if you're ready to book, call up Craft Tours and talk to them directly. Something else very exciting. I'm so glad to be sharing this with you all today. Our next free webcast is happening June 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with Jennifer Chesnick of Parker on the Porch. Who has heard of Parker on the Porch? She makes the cutest embroidery designs and in the hoop projects. And she's just the sweetest human. And I'm just so excited for you all to meet her, to try out her designs. We will be making a Boba tea zipper pouch in the hoop of our embroidery machine. So let me know in the comments if you are familiar with the Boba tea trend that is taking the world by storm right now. Boba tea it can actually be made of tea or like fruit juices, and they mix it with milks, plant milks, or it can just be like a slushy. There's all different kinds of boba teas. And the cool thing about them is they come with these little tapioca pearls. And most traditionally, when you get a boba milk tea, you would get brown sugar tapioca pearls in your drink. It kind of sweetens it up, but it's just a fun little pop in your mouth when you're drinking your drink. If you get a fruit one, you can get some fizzy popping bobas. Anyways, my kids are that's all they ever want is a boba tea. And they're just super fun. So anyways, this little zipper pouch looks like a little boba tea. It even has a little straw at the top of it because you need one of those fat straws so that you can drink your tapioca pearls through, or fit the tapioca pearls through your straw. So this is going to be the cutest thing. It makes a great gift for someone. Tuck in a little gift card to a boba tea shop near you, and I guarantee you will make the day of a little one, or even an old lady like me. I just think these are the cutest. So, of course, we have kits available for the boba tea zipper pouch, and you will get everything you need to create the zipper pouch. You also get the design files, of course, which will take you through the whole in the hoop project. You also get bonus design files to make a boba tea squishy stuffy. So you can make lots and lots of gifts with this in different, sizes. There's lots of hoop sizes, lots of finished zipper pouch sizes. And the kit comes with enough materials to make the largest size of the zipper pouch. So you can deviate from there. If you want to make a smaller size, you'll have plenty of materials in the kit. So if you've never heard of Parker on the Porch, like I said, it's a fantastic machine embroidery website. They have so many cute designs, but the name comes from Jennifer's daughter, Parker. She would always pose her out on her porch with her projects, and then that's how she would upload the photos of her projects to her website. So it became Parker on the Porch, Parker's on the Porch again with the boba tea stuffy, Parker's on the Porch again. Catch my drift? Super cute idea. So here is Parker on the porch with the boba tea stuffy. So that stuffy also comes in lots of design sizes, but the kit for the event is for the zipper pouch, not for the stuffy. But again, you will get the files to create that stuffy if you want to go ahead and make that, next after you get done with your boba tea zipper pouch. Just for registering for the free event, Parker on the Porch is giving everyone a little mochi charm and a card guard. A card guard is the little white Better with Bubbles design that you see there. And if you turn it over, it fits a little gift card or your ID or a little bit of cash, and you can make a little key ring out of it. So you'll get that little mochi charm. You can make it out of Sulky Felty. And you can see she's got two colors here. and also that card guard. All you have to do is register for the event and you get these design files for free, and you can start making cute little mochis that you can add to your zipper charm or what have you. Speaking of zipper charm, we threw in a special little gifty for everybody who purchases this kit. You will get, let me zoom in here, you will get this adorable little bubble tea or boba tea zipper pull charm. Is that the cutest thing you've ever seen? Oh, it just totally makes it. You could even turn this into a cute little necklace if you didn't want to put it on the zipper pull, but it just adds something special to this project. So you'll get a little boba tea zipper charm, and they come in all different colors that coordinate, you know, with all the colors you see here. So you might get pink, you might get teal, you might get purple. You get the idea. And it comes with a little jump ring, so you can add it to your zipper, or again, you can make it into a cute little necklace for whoever is receiving this, unless you're going to keep it for yourself because it is that cute. All right, so please register for our In the Hoop Boba Tea Zipper Pouch Webcast. That's a mouthful, with Parker on the Porch. Again, it's June 13th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be coming to you live. Now, if you cannot attend live, don't worry, because as with all of our events, once the live event ends, it becomes an on-demand video that you can watch at any time. So register, grab up your freebies, try out the Parker on the Porch designs, and then join us live or on demand June 13th. All right, lots of people saying I'm registering. Love the zipper pull. These are very cute. Thank you for explaining what boba tea is. Now you'll have to try one for yourself. They're just really fun to eat, as I mentioned, or drink rather. You can get them layered in different colors. I think this is why, kids of all ages really love it, because they're super colorful. And then, of course, you get your cute little tapioca pearls inside. All right, so let's get to our project at hand today, which is our Quilting Bee Placemat set. So all the instructions are within this pattern. It is a freebie at sulky.com. So just add the Quilting Bee Placemat set pattern to your cart. Go through the checkout process. It will say $0. And then you can download it, save it to your computer, print it out, what have you. Now, the last 2 pages of this pattern are your paper piecing patterns. So when you go to piece together your little bees, okay, so the bee is the portion of this that is foundation paper pieced. The rest of it is pieced traditionally. And I'm going to go through that process with you today. But at any rate, you only want to print out the bee page using your Sulky Paper Solvy. I'm only cautioning you on this because when you go to print this, your computer is automatically going to want to print every single page, right? So you need to tell it which page to print onto the Paper Solvy so that you're not using up your Paper Solvy on instructional diagrams and things like that. Ask me how I know this, because I have totally made that mistake more times than I care to admit. And there goes my Paper Solvy. It becomes very hard to reprint onto it and see all of your lines if you accidentally print your instructions onto the Paper Solvy. So just be wary of that. Print the right page for your bee piecing onto your Sulky Paper Solvy. What is Sulky Paper Solvy? Paper Solvy is a water-soluble, very thin paper that fits into your home printer, so you can print your foundation paper piecing patterns onto the Paper Solvy, sew through it, create all of your piecing, And then when you are done and your little bee block is complete, you can remove the paper solvy using a saturated Q-tip. Run that wet Q-tip along your larger piecing portions and then just lift away the paper. Or you can complete your entire placemat, leave the paper solvy totally intact, bind the placemat and totally finish it, and then you can throw it in your washing machine on a rinse and spin cycle, and the paper solvy will dissolve entirely. You don't have to pick out little pieces of paper on little, like the tip of your bee, where the stinger is. That's a tiny little piece of paper. If you were to pick that out, you would run the risk of popping out some of those stitches. So leave that intact and either, rinse it under running water or remove it with that wet Q-tip, like I said, or again, leave it intact and rinse it away once your placemat is complete. It's an amazing, revolutionary product, even though it's been around for a while, but I run into people all the time who do foundation paper piecing and have never heard of Sulky Paper Solvy. So we are going to discuss that at length when we get to the bee piecing portion of the pattern. But first, we've got to create our flower on the placemat. And let me go to a larger photo of the placemat so you can see. This placemat is comprised of this big, large-scale flower. So if you can just imagine like placing your plate over the flower. And then our cute little foundation paper pieced bees are sewn onto the side edge of that large-scale pieced flower. And, they have a little bit of movement to them. We're going to piece them together with angled corner sections of fabric so that they look like they're kind of flying by the flower. So cute. And as I mentioned, the flower is pieced in a more traditional way. And then our bees are pieced using foundation paper piecing techniques and Sulky Paper Solvy. All right, so first things first, we're going to start constructing the flower. And I must say, I do have some notes next to me so I don't get confused because there's a lot of squares and triangles. And as we move forward, I'm going to have to consult my notes just to make sure I can stay on track so that it all makes sense to everyone. So it looks impressive. It looks intimidating. There's a lot of pieces going on, but our pattern is designed by Ashley Huff. You might be familiar with her if you follow the National Quilter Circle. She also used to be with Sew News and Creative Machine Embroidery magazines, and she really breaks down the piecing in very manageable steps so that it's easy to understand and it's very thoughtfully constructed. So we don't have to deal with lots of tiny pieces. We're going to deal with larger pieces and then trim them down. So if you've never done a quilting project before, this is a great manageable starter project. And then you can also try your hand at foundation paper piecing with the bees. If you wanted to as well, you could just create this large scale flower and make a really pretty table topper out of it in the center of your table, maybe with, a bouquet of flowers inside of the center. So pretty. So there's lots of options for customizing this pattern as well. You can create just the flower, and then you can create some coasters out of just the bee blocks. You can create a larger quilt by, making several sort of placemat rectangles and then piecing those together to make a really pretty larger quilt. You can create a long table runner, maybe with 2 or 3 placemat sections sewn together. So lots of different ways to make this your own. So first off, we are going to piece together the flower portion. So we're going to make some half square triangles. All right. The easiest way to make half square triangles is to actually create squares and then place them together. Draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on the squares. Sew on either side of that line with your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then you're going to slice down the line and then open up your fabrics. And now you'll have 2 half square triangles. All right, so that's where you can see our gray square is on top of our yellow square. You're going to sew along that line that you draw and then slice along the line after you sew it and then open those up. So this is what I mean by thoughtful construction. We are not dealing with a bunch of triangles here where we've got to sew along that bias edge, making it a little bit stretchy and unstable. Instead, we are going to start with our squares and make them into half square triangles. So if you've never tried quilting before, a half square triangle is a lot of the times referred to as HST. And I've worked with some patterns where they simply call it HST and they never explain what that means. So HST means half square triangle, and this is how you would construct those. So we're going to create a bunch of those, and then we are going to make the unit 1 blocks of our flower block. All right. So we've got some more squares that we're dealing with. We have a large square right side up and then 2 smaller squares right side down along the corners. You're going to sew along the diagonal lines, trim away the upper fabrics that are pointing towards the outside. Then you're going to flip those to the right side and you're going to have your block 1 units. See how it's coming together? All right, I have to consult my notes, make sure I'm on the right track. Now we're going to do the same thing along the opposite corners of this section of the flower. So you can see we're going to put another square over the top of the square we just pieced. We're going to sew along that diagonal line, trim our seam allowance, and then flip that fabric over. So now we have a block that looks like this. All right. Now we're going to make some flying geese, okay? So if you've never heard of that term, a flying geese block, let me go to the finished one here, is a rectangle that has 2 corners, right? 2 triangles on either side. And you can create a lot of these and piece them together so they look like flying little squares, right? Or flying like geese beaks, I guess you would say. So to create those, we're going to start with our rectangle of fabric, and we're going to put our squares over the top, just like you see here. So our gray square, we're going to start with first, sew along that line, trim the seam allowance, flip that triangle to the right side. And it's a lot of sewing, trimming, flipping, pressing, right? This should be an embroidery design that goes on a quilt. So what I like to have on hand when I'm doing projects like this, traditional piecing projects for quilty items, I like to have my wool pressing mat and my little mini iron right next to my sewing machine. That way I don't have to sew one thing, stand up, walk to the other side of my studio, use my iron, come back and sew the next piece. It's really handy to have your little wool pressing mat next to you. Make sure you have something protective, even under that wool pressing mat sometimes, because if you're using steam, it goes right through that wool pressing mat and it can harm things underneath it. So even if you have your wool pressing mat next to you, if you tend to use a really hot iron with a lot of steam, make sure you have something protective underneath that as well. All right, so back to our flying geese. Then we're going to add our next gray square over the top of that yellow rectangle. We're going to sew on the opposite diagonal line, trim that seam allowance, flip it to the right side, give it a good press, and then we have our flying geese block. All right, so we're going to create our light yellow with gray corners, as well as our light yellow with dark yellow corners. And you'll see how this all comes together. Now we're going to make our corner units. All right, so again, we're going to do a half square triangle and some fabric squares. So you're going to take one of the half square triangles we made previously and sew it to one of the dark yellow squares. Again, all of the instructions, all the cutting instructions, yardage, everything that you need is inside of that free pattern. I'm just kind of going through it step by step. So be sure to grab up this pattern. You can print it out and have it handy next to you. I always do all the cutting first and kind of layer all the cuts by color so that when I then take it all over to my sewing machine, I know exactly what to grab for the piecing process. You can also write down, let's say you have a quilt pattern that has 5-inch squares and 6-inch squares of the same color. Definitely put that on a sticky note and then put that sticky note on the top of that fabric stack. That way you don't accidentally grab, a piece that's too large and then you go to the sewing machine thinking that maybe you miscut it. Things like that. So just try to stay organized, have a stack of sticky notes next to you, or some way of identifying your blocks after you cut them as well. All right, so we're going to take our half square triangle we made earlier, add it to a dark yellow square, and we're going to sew those together, and then we're going to orient that strip along the side of one of our number 1 units, okay? See why I needed to stay organized with my notes today? So now we're going to sew that long rectangle with that half square triangle to that square unit. And you can see how that light yellow fabric is going to match up perfectly with the light yellow fabric on that square to the right. So after you sew that together, we are going to stitch together another one of those triangle units using our half square triangle and our dark yellow fabric square. We're going to add a light yellow fabric square to the left edge. I know this is a lot. It sounds really confusing when we are having a conversation about it. It's much easier when you have that pattern in front of you and you can work your way through it at the machine. Again, be sure to be putting your questions and comments in the live chat so that I can address those as we move forward. Bonnie is saying, I have never paper pieced. I've been too intimidated. Looks like the paper solvy would remove the intimidation factor. It does make it easier, and I will talk about that momentarily once we get this giant flower pieced. I say giant, but it's placemat size. It's manageable. All right, so now we are going to add the rectangle we just pieced along the top edge of the unit we pieced previously. See how everything is coming together? Now we've got a corner unit of our flower, and we need 4 corner units. So this is going to be one corner of the flower, the right corner. You see, just by rotating them, we're going to start creating that outer edge of our flower. Now we've got to add some border pieces. You can see how those get pieced on this diagram. So your smaller border piece goes along the upper edge first, then you're going to add your longer border piece to the side. And now we're going to create the center of the flower. I believe this is the center. Let's make sure. Yes. So the center of the flower is a strip that goes along the center that we're going to build our corner blocks around. So this is one side of that center border, okay? So we've got 2 flying geese and our center fabric square. You can see how that gets pieced together and which colors go where. And now we have a center block that joins our 2 corner blocks. So we're going to make 1, 2, 3, 4 of those center rectangle blocks so that we can piece them and join those corners. So with 2 of the center blocks that go along the center portion, you're going to piece the center of your flower. So here is where you can customize this. You can add a cute little bee embroidery design in that center block if you want, or you can leave it and then plan to quilt it later with maybe a special little circle using some poly sparkle thread or something like this. You can also use a print fabric for this center dark gray square if you so choose. So lots of different ways, again, to personalize this. All right, I believe that's the same exact picture I just showed you, so bear with me a moment. So here you can see we have that center rectangle, and we're going to join that to our upper and lower flower sections. So see how impressive this block looks? And it's really just a series of squares that we are trimming down to look like triangles so that all of our pieces fit together, creating this beautiful flower. So we have our 4 corner units, and then we have all of our center rectangles, and then you have that gray square, and that's where I'm thinking, you know, I would definitely add a cute little bee design, something like this to tie together the foundation paper pieced bees that we're adding to the placemat as well. All right, so phew, now that we have that flower block done, you will create that for as many placemats as you want to create. Create 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever you desire. And now we're going to start piecing together our bees. So if this is your first foundation paper piecing project, there's way more information than I could cover in a So What episode, but we have tons of paper piecing tutorials on the Sulky blog. We have foundation paper piecing for beginners, lots and lots of tutorials for using Paper Solvy. So this is just one section of the bee. This is the bee's head and then the background fabric for that bee. So when you print out your bee design, there's going to be more to it than this. You're going to have the top section, which is your bee head. You'll have a middle section, which is part of your bee body. Then you'll have the lower section, which is your little bee, point, your little bee behind, if you will. All right. So I just sectioned off the top part of the bee block so that we could talk about these letters and numbers. But when you print this off, all 3 sections of the little bee block are going to be on one page, and you're going to print that onto your Sulky Paper Solvy. All right. All the sections that have a letter and number, that's what we are going to use for our fabrics. So you want to be sure that your fabrics that you're using are large enough to cover each little section. So they are in order for how you're going to piece them. So D1 first is pieced to D2. Then you add D3, D4, etc., working your way through this part of the block. Your paper is the base of your pattern. Excuse me, the base of your fabrics that you're piecing together. So you sew through your fabrics as well as the paper solvy. And the paper solvy is your guide as you work your way through the project. So what I like to do is I fold my paper solvy along the joining line between, let's say, D1 and D2, so that I can audition my fabrics and make sure that they are large enough to cover that section. So remember me saying that, quilting in general is a lot of, right sides together, sewing, trimming, pressing, and so forth. Paper piecing is all of that, okay? Because after we're done piecing, we want to trim away our seam allowance so that our seams are even, so that when we add our next piece of fabric, we don't have a bunch of scraggly edges to contend with. And the reason I mention that is because foundation paper piecing is a great way to use up little bits and pieces of fabrics that are too small for a whole project, but too big to throw away, because as sewers, we just are always thinking we can use it for something, right? So grab up your small scrap bin, dive in there, find some different sort of white, cream, or even blue would be a really pretty background for the bees and the flowers, or even green, even just whatever you like. They don't have to be solids, is my point. They can be a collection of prints that all have the same sort of color family, and you can use all of those for the background piecing of the bees. So kind of think outside of the box as far as that's concerned. You don't have to use all solid fabrics for your foundation paper piecing in general, but particularly for the background fabrics for these bees. So we want to be sure that we are trimming seam allowances as we go, and just make sure that, again, your pieces, when you fold them to the right side, they need to cover the entire section that they are intended for. So D2 needs to be much bigger than that little triangle because we're going to trim it away as we add more pieces. Is everyone following me? I know it's kind of a complicated technique, but once you start foundation paper piecing, it becomes really second nature. I still have to consult some specific, instructional tutorials just to make sure that I start off the right way, and then I can start adding my other pieces as I go along. We have a really great free webcast. It's called the Road Trip Quilt. And it is a webcast we did a couple of years ago with Rachel Painter. And she creates these beautiful national park themed quilts and quilt blocks. And she really breaks down foundation paper piecing in a really thoughtful, manageable way. So if you've never done foundation paper piecing and you want more of a video tutorial than I can give you in the time it takes to do a so what, I highly suggest go register for that free webcast. It's called Road Trip Quilt. You'll learn all about paper solvy, all about paper piecing. She has some really great designer tips. This is all that she does is foundation paper piecing. So she's a really great resource to go to learn, letter number combinations, which goes where, how to audition your fabric behind the pieces to make sure they're large enough, etc. So I highly suggest that as a great resource for you. So at any rate, you're going to foundation paper piece, which means our fabrics are right sides together on top of our paper. And then we start opening up, folding, adding more pieces on top of our paper, sewing along those solid lines. and making sure that our fabric passes that line so that we have a seam allowance. All right, so once you have that, the outer line is your trimming line for the block itself, so that we have a seam allowance for adding this bee to other things, like our flower, or adding a binding if we want to make this into a coaster, things like this. So you'll have 3 bee sections that are all foundation paper pieced. When they are all complete, you'll press them nice and flat and trim along that outer solid line. Then you're going to piece together your 3 bee sections to create your final bee block. Then when you have your final bee block, there's also a template included with your pattern for these corner triangle pieces so that we can orient the bee so that it looks like it's kind of flying a little bit, right? So it's diagonal. So you'll add a corner piece of fabric to the top edge of the bee, the lower edge of the bee, and then both sides. So once you have one bee that's oriented one way on the diagonal, then you'll create another bee that's oriented the opposite way, right? So one's flying sort of to the left, one is flying sort of to the right. Okay? Super, super cute. And again, you can just create a bunch of bees, create some coasters, quilt them to the nines, bind them, and you've got a great little coaster set that you can decorate with or gift away to somebody this summer or this spring, and a super cute gift. But if you're creating the placemat, we will then add the bee blocks to the edge of our flowers. So first you will piece your bees together, matching up the upper edge of one bee to the lower edge of the other. Then you will sew that side edge to the side edge of your flower block. Now we've got our placemat quilt top, and we're going to layer it with our batting and our backing fabric, and then we get to quilt it. So I love how Ashley has quilted this, particularly in the flower portions. She actually only quilted the light yellow portions of the flower, and she used Sulky 30 weight blendables thread for that part of the flower. The blendables thread is randomly dyed every 2.5 to 5 inches across the length of the thread. So you get all of these random colors that pop up, and it's, I don't know, you get lots of color in your flower without having to swap a lot of thread colors. And the 30 weight thread is much thicker than like an all-purpose weight thread, right? So you need a 90-14 needle when you're working with the 30 weight thread. But it's really visible, right? It pops off of the flower. So you could choose to do that for your quilting. You could also just quilt in the ditch of your flower seams. But what Ashley did was, after she decoratively stitched along the light yellow portions of the flower, you can see she's got some diagonal lines, and then she's got these curved lines along some of the flower petals. Then she simply straight line quilted across the entire piece. And that kind of unifies everything, right? Because our foundation paper pieced bees have a lot of pieces to them. And when you add this straight line quilting, it really unifies that background and ties the whole thing together. So for that, she used 50 weight cotton thread, so much lighter than the 30 weight thread that was used for the flower quilting. And the 50 weight cotton just kind of blends in to the background. So depending on the look you're going for, you can choose to do quilting that either blends in or stands out simply by the thread weight that you're choosing for your quilting. So after you do your quilting, you'll trim up your placemat so that all of your edges are even, and then you can bind it in the method of your choice. You can also choose to leave your backing fabric much larger on all corners. And then when you trim up your quilt, you only trim up the front, the quilt top, and your batting, and then you can fold over your backing and do like a self-binding method for your quilt, or for your placemat rather. Really is like a mini quilt. So as I mentioned, lots of ways to personalize this project, and also lots of ways to quilt it. And the reason I am bringing up our quilty wall hanging is because you could also choose an end-to-end quilting design for your placemat project. I particularly enjoy the end-to-end quilting designs from Designs by Juju. And you can choose one of those designs and stitch it out in a mega hoop. If you have a mega magnetic hoop, even better, because you can probably quilt your entire placemat in one hooping. Amazing. But at any rate, you could choose a really fun, springy end-to-end quilting design. And if you've never done end-to-end quilting, please register for our quilty wall hanging embroidery sewing session with Designs by Juju and Becky Thompson of Power Tools with Thread, because she explains how to start and stop your quilting stitches when you're working with these in the hoop quilting designs so that they match up perfectly. And you can choose horizontal or vertical orientations. You can choose the large designs and have your quilting design much larger across your quilt, or you can choose smaller designs to have lots of motifs running across your placemat. So lots of different techniques to learn during that embroidery session as well, but would be really awesome to finish quilting your Quilting Bee placemats in the hoop of your embroidery machine. So just another option for the quilting there. If, free motion quilting or just winging it to, straight line quilt and all of those things, if that's intimidating to you, it's actually much easier to let your embroidery machine do all of the work of the quilting. Just need a little bit of tips and tricks from Becky Thompson and Designs by Juju to guide you. And I promise you, you will be hooked on quilting in the hoop. And being able to complete lots of quilty projects, regardless of size, by using these end-to-end quilting designs. So you can create your placemat. As I mentioned, you can turn it into a table runner, you can turn it into a larger quilt, and you can even just isolate your little bees and add your batting and backing and quilt them. You can see this is quilted one way straight line and then another way straight lined, so that you have this little checkerboard sort of block outline for your bee. Really cute way of quilting it. And then simply bind it. I also wanted to share with you here too. I always finish my quilt binding by hand. It's just how I was taught, and I really think it gives it a nicer finish along the back of my quilt, because you cannot tell, you can't see any of the stitching on the back side when you do a little ladder stitch or slip stitch to finish your binding along the back of your quilt. But what's really cute, and I can't believe I never really thought of this before, is to bind it, that final binding stitch, with a blanket stitch on your sewing machine. Isn't that cute? So what Ashley has done here is she actually starts sewing her binding on from the back side of the little coasters or the placemats, sewing it on the back side and then folding it around to the front, and then blanket stitching along that front folded edge of the binding to secure the binding in place. And it's just another great little detail. She used the 30 weight Blendables thread for the blanket stitched binding to give another pop of color and punch to the edge, and it is just the cutest thing. Also, that blanket stitch, it's really forgiving. So if you kind of miss the edge of your binding, you know, either your straight edge of your blanket stitch is going to catch it, or the little edge of your stitching, the little tooth of the blanket stitch will catch that edge of the binding. So it's really forgiving, especially for little projects like those coasters. All right, I'm going to go ahead and address any questions we may have had. Let's see, lots of you have signed up for the Boba Tea webcast. Bee mug rugs, how cute, love it. Clovis says, I do hand binding also, loving paper piecing. That is perfect. Colleen has just started her wall hanging today. That is awesome. Please let us know how you like it and how you like the format of our embroidery sewing session. We've gotten a lot of feedback so far. You know, some people are really loving working their way through the embroidery session and kind of picking and choosing which videos they want to watch when. So we really tried to section this project into these manageable chunks so that you can learn about in the hoop applique when you're working on the sewing machine and the friendship stars. You can learn about end-to-end quilting when you are adding the quilting to the piece, so that when you do a project like these placemats and you're like, wait a second, I can't really remember what Becky said about the end-to-end quilting, you can go back into your library at sewingonline.sulky.com, go back to just the end-to-end quilting tutorial, and give yourself a little refresher and review on that. So we tried our best to kind of section it out in logical, manageable chunks so that you would be able to navigate your way through that project and also apply those techniques to other things that you might be making as well. All right. Betsy says, Designs by Juju has a bee pattern in the end-to-end quilting. It doesn't surprise me because she has tons and they're great for so many different occasions. So you could grab up that bee pattern. It would look so cute on these placemats. I can't wait to see it. If you make it, Betsy, please upload photos of it to our Sulky Facebook group, which is called Sulky Stitch and Post. If you're not a member of that Facebook group yet, all you have to do is simply ask to join. Go on your Facebook account and find our Sulky Stitch and Post Facebook group, and we'll let you in. You can post your projects, pictures, ask your questions, all kinds of stuff, and it's a really good time over there. All right, Ruth Ann says, I think I have to make these placemats. All right, Bernie's loving the pattern as well. I really want to thank Ashley Huff also for supplying this project for everyone. It's a really, really great way, again, to just immerse yourself into foundation paper piecing. Oh, I did want to mention, so what are the benefits of using Paper Solvy versus regular paper that you might use for foundation paper piecing? If you have paper pieced before in this way, you may have just used a lighter weight, like even a printer paper for paper piecing. So Paper Solvy, first off, is much thinner. Also, the benefits of having it be water soluble, of course. But when you're using sort of a regular paper, or even a paper that is touted as being perfect for foundation paper piecing, but not a water soluble one, a lot of times the very first instruction in that pattern will be to make your stitch length like a 2.0 or even lower. So that means your stitches are very close together. And the purpose of that is so that you're almost perforating your paper so that when you go to remove it, it becomes easier to tear it away along your seam lines. Well, let me just tell you, when my stitches are 2.0 or 1.5, oh my gosh, when I make a mistake, picking out those seams using my seam ripper or what have you becomes even greater of a chore than it was, when my stitches are 3.5 or 3.0. So it's a pain in the neck, honestly, to make your stitches that close together, in my opinion. When you're using Paper Solvy, you can use your standard stitch length, and because you're not tearing the paper away, you're moistening it along those seams and then just lifting it right away. And you can even, might be able to reuse sections if they're large enough sections for other things. But at any rate, so much easier if you make a mistake. And let me tell you, again, I know I've said this before, I have never gotten through a project without making at least one mistake. I think if I did, I would throw myself a party and you all would be invited and we would have it here on the So What. Whether it's putting something, right side against wrong side, and then I go to press it open and what have I done? To inserting the wrong end of the sleeve to a garment, just all kinds of things. We all make mistakes, right? And I just really don't want to be picking out these tiny little narrow seams, So that's one of the greatest things about using the Paper Solvy is you don't have to do that because we're not trying to perforate the paper as we sew. I also find when your seam allowance is that small, it gets to be a little bit bumpy along your seam line. So when you go and press open your fabrics, you have a little telltale bump of thread underneath. And then when you go to quilt your project, those little bumps will actually make a difference in your design. You might have little areas where it's a little bit raised and other areas that are flatter on your quilt top. So even if you're using a very lightweight thread, this can happen if your stitches are that close together. So lots of benefits to using Paper Solvy other than the fact that you can simply rinse it away once your paper piecing is complete. All right, the quilting is beautiful. Thank you, thank you. Yes, Ashley is a really great designer and she does such a beautiful job. The bees look awesome, so nice and uniform. Yeah, that's the thing about foundation paper piecing as well. You don't have to measure out all these strips and, squares and all of this stuff. You can start with a rather large piece of fabric and then trim it down as you go. So it's really, I think you will all like it if you have not tried it. All right, Betsy is saying a 1/4-inch ruler is a must for trimming. Yes, when you're trimming those seam allowances. Great tip. All right, Sherry says, I'm teaching a foundation paper piecing class at my quilt guild in June. Sherry, you've got to get yourself some Paper Solvy and add that to your class because your students will thank you for it. Just saying. All right. Barb says, I'm not a quilter, so this might be an obvious question. Do you backstitch the pieces? So when I am foundation paper piecing, I do backstitch. I just do one little backstitch at the end and beginning of my stitches because I just find it makes things easier and I don't want the ends to kind of pop out as I'm working my way through it. Your little backstitch is going to be within the seam allowance. So it's not going to add any bulk or any little bumps throughout your stitching. So I do, and maybe other people do not, but that is what I do when I'm foundation paper piecing. All right, Gail says, I have Paper Solvy, but never used it. So I got the Bee Placemat project to practice. Perfect. Again, I think you will love it. Could you please address the cotton steel thread? So your question may have come earlier and I might have missed it. So cotton and steel thread is, here's the story. Cotton and steel, cotton plus steel, is actually a brand name of a fabric line. Cotton and steel fabrics are made by RJR Fabrics, and it's just the name of the designer fabric. So our cotton and steel thread, all the colors of that thread line coordinate with all the colors that they use to make cotton and steel fabrics. So that's why it's called cotton and steel. It's not made of steel, none of that. It's just a brand name that's used for that fabric line. So we have 100 threads in the 50 weight cotton. So the lighter weight, sort of what I would use for like an all-purpose thread. It is Egyptian cotton, long staple, great for piecing, quilting when you want the quilting stitches to blend in with your fabrics. So that is the story of that. All right, Fran says, I also backstitch when beginning and ending. All right. Thanks for the sewing bee. So much to learn. All right, Donna agrees on the 1/4 inch ruler. Perfect. All right, I think that I have addressed all of your questions today. If I have not, please continue to put them in the live chat or in the comments below, and we will continue answering them this afternoon. If we didn't get to your question and you need an immediate answer for a project you're working on or something regarding a Sulky product, please email us at info@sulky.com. We have the best customer service in the land, and we are here to help make sure that you have fun at the sewing machine and not frustration. So, thank you so much for joining me today. Be sure to register for our Boba Tea webcast. You can still register for our quilty wall hanging project with Designs by Juju and Power Tools with Thread. Those kits are still on sale, but for a limited time only. And I hope to see you next week for another So What?